Hey there, boils and ghouls. Welcome to this week's episode of Hollow Weekly, and boy, do we have a great interview for you this week. I got to sit down with Sylvia Caminer, the director of the new film Follow Her. It's about a struggling actress that responds to a mysterious classified ad and soon finds herself trapped in her new boss's twisted fantasy. We had a really great conversation. We talk a little bit about directing, a little bit about Hitchcock, things that happen on set while you're making, a film like this. And let me tell you, when it comes to thrillers, there's a lot of thrillers out there that talk about their twists and their turns and, yada, yada, yada. A lot of them don't hit this mark. This film has a twist in it. My jaw was on the floor. I couldn't, I did not expect it. I mean, I didn't even see it coming. So when it happens, I was just like, oh my God, are you kidding me? It's that good. Starring and written by Danny Barker. And if you've listened to the show before, you know that I love the Netflix Sabrina show. And this film has Luke Cook in it. You'll know him as Lucifer Morningstar, and this one he stars as Tom Brady. You'll see; it'll make sense when you see the movie. It's out today, June 2nd. So go rent it, go buy it, go watch it, get your popcorn ready. I cannot recommend this enough. Fantastic thriller. Here's the interview.
May I have your attention, please?
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I don't know what real anymore.
Horror. Something even more terrible than you.
So first things first. Follow Her. How did this come about? How did you get attached? How did you get hooked up with Danny Barker, the writer of the film? How did that all come about?
Well, so, I've been producing films for too long. A lot of first-time filmmakers. And then about 10 years ago, I started directing documentaries and doing my other love, which is travel and directing and producing unscripted shows. And finally, I was like, holy shit, Sylvia, what the hell are you waiting for? You were going to direct a feature, narrative film 10 years ago. What's going on? So I started reading scripts like crazy, maybe 6 years ago. And I knew I wanted it to be genre. I just felt like that was an easier entryway into film. They're easier to market and so forth. And I read so many scripts, and so many of them were crap. And, or if not that, just not something so violent, so misogynistic, and just something that I was like, God, I can't imagine spending 3 years of my life. Now I've spent about 4 on Follow Her so far. And then I had a mentor who sadly passed during the making of the film, but John Gallagher, who's a very well-known indie New York City filmmaker, and he'd met Danny. She was looking for a director and a way to make the film. And so he recommended me, and
cool.
read the script. Yeah. And it's funny, the first time I read it, it was called A Killer Script. And I was like, I don't know about that title, but it felt a little cheesy, a little maybe too 90s thriller.
Right, yeah.
And I really dug it. And I was like, that she's talented. Danny's got a vision and a voice. And, I knew it just felt like there was stuff we could do. It was a little scary because she'd written it for herself to star in. And, the writer to star in, and she hadn't really done much that I could watch. She'd been in a few films, small roles, but we had a great conversation right from the first conversation. She had to kind of put her trust in me because there wasn't a narrative feature she could watch that I directed. So we're both like, what the hell, let's do it. And we kind of jumped off the cliff and never looked back.
Wow. That is amazing. Just took a chance on it and it fit like a glove.
Yeah. And it's been a fun ride. Yeah.
I'm curious. You mentioned you read a bunch of scripts to sort of get your head in the zone of narrative filmmaking. Was there any scripts out of the hundreds I'm sure you read? Was there a diamond in the rough? Was there one that you read where you were like, finally, I found something that resonates with me that you dug?
Yes, there was one script that I so friggin' wanted to make, and it got swooped away from me by a couple of days, and I still look, and I don't think it's ever been made. And now I'm like, I don't know if I'd want to go make it anymore. But I feel like reaching out after this comes out and seeing if that was still available. I think this one, though, is actually more timely. But I just had a visceral response to that one. And this one, I saw the promise of it. I saw the talent there, but it took a little bit of, we workshopped the script for like 10 months, and she was great, very collaborative and great to work with.
How long was the shooting schedule for this movie?
Yeah, it was pretty quick, but not terrible on an indie, basis. So we shot the first part, everything from when the Jess character, the protagonist, leaves the city to go meet Tom until she leaves the country in 12 days. Yeah. And then we came back to shoot, and that was upstate New York, Hudson Valley, Saugerties, Kingston, Woodstock area. And then we shot for another 6 days with a handful of little second unit half days, me and the DP and Danny to get, the voyeuristic footage. So altogether, I guess that's 18 days with a few second unit.
That is incredible.
Days, yeah.
Jeez, 18 days to knock out photography for that is incredible.
It was great. Luke Eisbuehler, yeah.
Early in the movie, and I got to I'm see if my camera can reach you. We got to talk about Hitchcock, because there is a big Hitchcock thing, and I saw in another interview you mentioned there was even more Hitchcock early into the film. So I'm curious. Well, actually, let me show you this real quick, because we're in the Hitchcock office of all places. Let me see if I can show you. So we have our Psycho birds. I'm trying to get there. We go there, and then over here we got our Vertigo rear window. There's a I don't know if it's like an underground movie situation called Secret Movie Club, and they have all these crazy cool custom posters. So we were like, originally we're going to do Jaws and some other stuff, but we're like, we're going to go full on Hitchcock. So when I watched the movie, I was like, this is great. This is perfect.
I love it.
So what did you have to scale back on? That was the Hitchcock. What did you have to scale back on? And then what did you pull? When did you end up pulling from?
It was actually the opposite. I scaled up the Hitchcock.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
The only Hitchcock in the film was in the ad that she reads, because Danny really wasn't very familiar with Hitchcock. In fact, she asked me after we shot, like, what are some of his big movies? I have to, see them more. But I think I've been a fan of Hitchcock my whole life. How could you not if you like suspense and thrillers? He was a master at what he did so well, which I definitely stole, and I can give him homage for it, was the building of tension and the keeping, ratcheting it up by letting the audience know more than the protagonist. And I use that a lot, and I actually placed some very specific moments where I made sure that the audience had a hint and knew something more than Jess did, hoping that might make them lean in a little bit and feel like they want to yell at the screen and say, will you get the hell out of there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So now for an easy one, and or not easy one, but if you had to pick top Hitchcock,
can I?
Where you go?
A couple, or you want just my first one?
Actually, let's go with a couple, because picking one is like, it's so hard to just pick the one.
I mean, for this, I would say Rear Window, just because of the amount of tension. And I mean, Jimmy Stewart sitting in his, his chair, basically with his leg in a cast for the whole movie, looking at with binoculars, and the way he managed to just keep that. I also really love Strangers on a Train. I think it's a very lesser known, but I love North by Northwest and Psycho, of course. What about you? What are your favorites?
Well, I wrote this down in my notes. It's funny. We actually just went to the Oscar Museum Sunday, and we saw the typewriter that Psycho was written on.
Oh man,
very crazy to see. My first gut answer would probably have to be Vertigo.
I'd say Vertigo. Yeah, that's great.
All the colors, all the stuff. But on I think it was New Year's.
Bernard Herrmann's score. Holy shit. Yeah.
I can't get enough of that.
Yeah.
But I recently saw on New Year's Day, we went and saw a 35mm showing of Notorious, and I had never seen it before.
Yeah. Wow,
and
that's an underappreciated one.
Anything Claude Rains is in, I'm there. And
I love Claude Rains,
but I had to put Notorious because it was I'd seen Vertigo at a theater, and we saw Notorious at a theater, and there's a scene where they're trying to grab a wine bottle, and it's going closer to the edge. Whole audience gasped, and I'm like, that is crazy. This movie is how old, and he still has this audience in the palm of his hand. He can do whatever he wants. So I gotta go Notorious.
Wow, I'm gonna watch it again this weekend. I haven't
It's a good
watched
one.
it probably 20 years.
Well, speaking of Rear Window and cameras, you do a really interesting thing throughout the whole movie. And there's almost, I was thinking of it as like two segments. Early in the film, we see a lot of different types of media. So
Right.
there's our standard, I don't know what you want to call it, narrative camera, where we're watching it as a film. But in my notes here, there's one time we switch to a different camera, and it's during Jess's audition.
Right.
And then it cuts to a different camera during the toe tango.
Right.
And so there's those shots, and then later on in the film, obviously there's like the 5 cameras. There's the glasses. There's the ring. There's the
Right.
how did you balance all of that? Like, it feels like you have so much in your arsenal that you balanced it so well. Like, I felt like I was watching it from the cinematic point of view, but then you'd switch over here, and all of a sudden now I'm a voyeur. Now I'm a fly on the wall. How did you balance all of that?
Well, that was a real challenge. And I will say, thank God I had time to focus and put a lot of research in, and not even so much research, but I really, because so much of it is a two-hander and in one location, I thought, boy, I just have to get it right and understand the film language. And I also am one of those that I don't want to have to read a lot of texts, and I don't want to get lost in the social media aspect, especially when it's the two of them and I want to build tension, because I feel like that would bring back, it would like slam the tension down if we lose sight of them to read a bunch of comments and be thinking about social media.
Right.
So my DP, Luke Geisbuehler, who's friggin' brilliant, he did all the Borat movies, so he's worked with Sacha Baron Cohen a lot, and he's also done a lot of narrative features. We started looking at different cameras and trying to determine, we both knew we wanted a cinematic film, but we also knew that we didn't shoot in the really wide aspect ratio, which I actually prefer, but because we needed the screen space, like, because we knew we wanted to mark out where on the screen we would have texts and posts and tweets and all that crap. So that was one thing to think about, and how to get that language and that social media world done quick so that we could leave it behind a bit when we got to the meat of the story between, the Jess and Tom characters, and then the other cameras, if you start looking at the world and thinking about not just how, like how you see the world, or like the omniscient camera, we called it, which is like the God's view. There's a lot of cameras on you. When you go through a traffic light, there might be a camera on you. When you're at an audition, right there on their table is this crappy little camera. And so she's being filmed where like every blemish, it just looks like hell, to sometimes we would show like she's crossing a street and you're like, whoa, what's that camera? And it's very clear. It's marked like, oh, she just walked through. Did she walk through someone's shot? Or are they following her? And even like in the Uber towards the end of the movie, there's that camera, which most Ubers nowadays, God forbid something happens to them, they have a camera, so we wanted to kind of show, but it was also very complicated because we're like, how the hell, like the editor, Alex Gans, and I would often like be like, and
what I really liked about it was I watched this. I don't know why I watched it, but there was Anna Wintour did a masterclass about fashion, and I don't know why I watched it, but I think I watched it with my fiance, and she said something about the way she views clothes, and she kept using the word texture, and she didn't just mean of the fabric. She meant like, how does it fit in with everything? And that's really like seared into my brain, and I kept thinking that watching it with the movie, because I think a lot of filmmakers, like, you mentioned you wanted to do the real wide Carpenter-esque, cinema thing. And it's a really big risk to just be like, hey, we're going to break that down. We're going to give you all these other different cameras, give you all that different types of texture. And but it was very flawless in this movie. And I think the fact that you'd set it up with this age of social media, that cameras are all around you at all times, whether you like it or not, I thought it played off really well. So I wanted to ask you, we got to go into some social media conversation, given the film. What's your stance on cameras being everywhere? People always trying to do social media, because I do think there's this line of using it as a creative. There's a creative space for it where you can really flourish and show these great ideas and cool things. But then there's also this like, stop filming me,
Right.
kind of thing. Where do you land on it? What's your just general thoughts about it?
That is a tough one. And I will say that I kind of came into social media kicking and screaming. I was a later, I had no interest in it for a long time. And then I was like, well, shit, I'm in the film, I'm going to have to at least dabble in it to promote my work. And you have to. But I never really, it's also probably because I'm not in my 30s or 20s. So I didn't grow up with finding my value and like my friends online and all of that. But it's a social phenomenon, I think. And I think it's actually a shift in human evolution, in a sense, the use of the way we use our phones and social media. And I think it's a little bit, I won't say alarming, but I think if not used wisely or properly, it can create problems. I mean, what are we saying online? Are we being respectful? Are we filming people without their permission and putting it online the way Jess does? Like, that was another thing I loved about this story is her morals are very questionable. Like she pretty self-centered, like, I don't care what I have to do to get ahead. But that is a little bit of a mentality that's, I think, quite common on social media. Although, there is, repercussions for that. And you have to be careful. And even, I mean, I don't watch it much influencers. I do follow Luke Cook, who plays Tom, because he's friggin' hysterical.
He is great on TikTok.
He's insane. And it was so fun that he is the one making a mockery of influencers, and he has great fun with it. So I feel like there's gotta be a hierarchy and society. We haven't set up any real safeguards. So who's monitoring that? It's got to come from within, because you let anything run rampant and there will be a lot of misuse.
You did and not to go into any spoilers, but you did a really fantastic job at showing the people who are watching the media happening. And it's funny because when you see those shots, you're like, that's me. That's funny. Like I can't. But what's beautiful about it is it's like I can't judge what Jess is doing. Like I can't judge her, because who am I to say? Like there's a line, the relationship between her and her father. He tells her to get a real job.
Right.
And you see a lot of that with people online. People say, "Oh, well, go get a real job," and you're like, "Well, they're paying real taxes." So who are you to say what's a real job and what's not? And it really put myself in the shoes of like, who am I to be a hypocrite to like judge this person?
Right. And it's so easy to, to fall into that trap. You're so close, like the brass ring is right there. And it's like, when you start making little exceptions and the line just keeps getting either pushed or erased and thinner. And that's one of the reasons I thought that, that father character was so important. And we worked a lot on, we were so fortunate to get Mark Moses, who, like, the minute you see him, you're like, I know that guy, because he can inform the audience, like, just by his looks. Like, he makes a look at her and you're like, oh, I get it. He's so, like, done with what she does. And we needed to make Jess empathetic, even though, she, like, she does some, like I said, questionable things, but she's a real person with dreams and aspirations, and she's getting kicked out of her apartment, and she has real life troubles that she has to solve, which we hoped would, if someone's saying bullshit about, would she go with him? Well, hell yeah, she would. First off, he's Luke and he's very handsome and charming, but also she has to put up an episode, and she's got bills to pay, and she's getting,
the rent's due.
right.
And I, as someone who first started out as a production assistant answering Craigslist calls, like, you got to do it. Like, you got to do it. Like, you get an email, they're like, meet me at this place. And you're like, sure. Okay. It's completely plausible. And you just got to fingers crossed that it turns out okay. Well, speaking of, Oh, sorry. Go. No,
Well,
go
I'm
ahead.
just going to say one very short thing because
Yes,
it's
yes,
a separate Danny, who plays Jess, who wrote the script, actually had a YouTube show like 12 years ago where she found the weirdest jobs online and filmed them secretly and put them
Oh
on
my
her
God.
show, edited them and put them on her show. But she was very careful. She always went with someone. Like she always went with Muscle to make sure no one, but
That is so scary.
yeah, I know.
That
It
is-
was about 12 years ago. Yeah, like pretty ahead of its time. Yeah.
Oh my God. So she was able to pull from some
We
pretty
were
real places.
that tickling thing, and yeah. I mean, she got tickled for. I'm like, you got tickled for an hour. I think she said for $25. I'm like, well, but she wasn't just doing it for the $25. She was
Right.
doing it for her show. So the real value was this is gonna be a killer episode. I'll get 1 million views. So it was
Oh my gosh.
monetary, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I have to ask about Luke and his performance. How did you guys come up with that? He was so unpredictable. I never knew what he was going to do. He was bouncing off the walls. There was part of me wanted to trust him because he looks like he can be normal, but he's not. And it feels like a tornado of confusion. How did that collide? How did you guys work on that character?
So, Judy Henderson did our casting, and we kind of put out a wide. We, of course, did a few Hail Mary passes, which didn't go anywhere, to get a star, a big name. Luke came in on an audition. I remember for me, there were two things that I felt I needed with that actor to play that role. Chemistry with Jess. He had to be charismatic, but the other thing, I had to believe there was a menace to him and that he could switch on a dime, that anything is possible with his character. So the actor has to be able to bring that. And I saw enough of both in his audition, to feel like, yeah, I mean, this guy, he wasn't as much on social media like now. He kind of blew up after the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which he had just finished filming when he worked with us. But then, typical of not even just independent films, most films have very little rehearsal. We had 2 days. We read through the script, talked beats and stuff, but I made sure not to get into any heavy conversations about their characters and motivations or any of that together. And so Luke and I had talked a little bit, but he didn't need a ton of direction or like depth into his character. He knew this guy. He knew what he needed to bring to Tom. And so we had discussed that when he shifts there's a certain place where suddenly he's like a different guy almost. And I was like, well, at that moment, we have to believe that Tom could do anything. Nothing is off the table. And the only way that's going to be believable is if everything he's done up to that point leads you to believe that. And then also his performance from that point forward is so zany and so off the charts that you believe it. And I remember about a day and a half before we were going to shoot that section of the film, we tried to shoot in order, but it didn't happen. But we did shoot that stuff towards the last few days. And he said to me, I've been working on some stuff and I'm going to go pretty far. I was like, go for it. Good. And we made sure not to tell Danny. Yeah, she was like scared. I almost, because this was probably the one place in the film that she had a different vision than the film. She didn't see it as intense. And like when you're sitting next to Luke and he did quite a bit of improv there. A lot of the craziest, wackiest, funniest lines are his improv.
So what I was wondering is how much of the film you were talking about Luke's improv. How much improv was there on set? How close did you stay to the script?
Yeah. So to Danny's credit, and this is a huge, I'm really proud of her, and she did such a great job with this. The script wasn't too precious to her, but she also, and she and I discussed, like, there was a rhythm to it, and there were boundaries that we really couldn't or wouldn't want to step outside, except for maybe that last little section where it got really intense. But, it could have been really challenging, because I've worked with, as a producer on films where writers are if they're there, they're so caught up with every word. And she really wasn't like that. If the improv, felt in tune with the character. And so, and I believe, and I learned this in, my producing of features, is you really want to create a comfortable, safe environment on set so that your actors feel able, to try things. And I really tried, I did a lot of reading and trying to really get ready for my first time directing actors for film. I'd done some stage directing, but one thing I really wanted to do was I wanted to let them know that I valued their collaboration and their input, and that to the point where I wanted them to feel if they really wanted to try something, that I wanted to give them that opportunity. So I tried as much as possible to always ask them before leaving a certain setup, especially if it was a meaty one, that they were okay, that I was happy, I got what I felt we needed for that moment, but was there something that, did they feel the same?
Right.
And so I think just that kind of working together just allowed them, to really bring it. And boy, did they both, they really brought it.
Their chemistry is on point. It is so good. I'm curious, you mentioned your history with documentary filmmaking, the stage directing. Is there anything when you were done making this film, was there anything that you were able to pull that you learned while making this movie where you're like, oh, that's a great lesson. So going into the next picture, I have, I'm building up your arsenal. Was there anything that happened where you were like, oh, I like that?
Yeah. I think the big thing, so I'm, because of my years of producing, I was directing and producing. We had a really great, I brought on a guy that I'd been working with for a while, Michael and Jay, and to be our kind of nuts and bolts lead producer during the filming portion. So I could try to take that hat off and just direct. But of course, I friggin' couldn't. I was producing myself. I was like arguing with myself. Sylvia, you don't have time for another take. Move on. The light's going down. And so that was a bit challenging. So one thing I would try to do on the next one, and I'm working with a pretty established producer on hopefully my next film, and so I really won't have to do that. And it wasn't like I couldn't rely on Michael. I could, but he was so busy doing so much, and so there was nobody really to police the director for time, and we're getting behind, except for me, which as a director is not necessarily a good thing, because I think the producer won out sometimes, or I wish the producer had not. The other thing, and I'll say it's, which it was a blessing in disguise, was that on day one of filming, I mean, my gosh, Luke had just flown in from LA. We were just getting to know each other. We were supposed to do the scene in the park where they meet for the first time. Like, it's such a perfect way to start. There was a little charm, a little dance, the crew's getting to know each other. And we had to, because of weather, shoot the bedroom scene first.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And I actually think it was a blessing in disguise that it the whole movie, I don't know, like it forced us all to just jump in, like, no holds barred, and just get dirty and get ready, and just, we all, like, I hadn't even shot listed. I had shot listed the whole movie. I felt so prepared. I had my binder, my little notes. I was gonna watch Sliver and all these movies, like some of these crazy scenes, to get ready for that scene. And next thing I know, it's 9 p.m. and I'm calling the production designer, like, oh my God, I don't think we can shoot outside tomorrow.
Gosh.
And Noah Bricklin, who's fabulous, was like, Sylvia, the only set I can have ready, because you'll see the world in the barn if we shoot in there, is the bedroom scene. And I'm like, oh my God, to call the actors at, imagine, 9:30 at night to say, guys, I know what we were planning. We weren't even going to get to that until the second week. Yeah, that was not a fun phone call. And we decided, I asked them that night, I was like, do you want to just 100% say we're doing it? We're doing the bedroom scene, or wait until the morning to see? And the three of us decided, let's wait till the morning. And in the morning, we probably could have gotten away with it, but it looked really dangerous. And the whole thing happens in one night. So when we get hit with rain, we're screwed. So on set, about an hour in, I was like, oh my God, we have to do them. So, but I do think it, so I would maybe use something like that again. I don't know. I shouldn't be saying that out loud, but
You made plans and the movie gods laughed.
Right, exactly. And I thank them for it. So be careful what you curse. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the score by Alexander. There we go. I didn't want to watch that one either. I like I was saying earlier before we started recording the podcast or the interview, it gave me a little bit of late 90s thriller, but then a little bit of this modern technological cinematic score that really fit the Twitch, TikTok, online, thing.
Yeah.
How did that collaboration work about, and how did you guys land where you landed?
So he'd been referred to me, and for me, score is everything. I mean, like, I love stuff like Nina Rota, like some of the composers from like the old Italian movies and stuff. So I knew also in this type of a film, score would be super important, and I wanted to find someone that understood that, but wouldn't try to lay too much in, and I didn't want to rely too heavily on it, but there were certain areas where I knew, even when filming, like, oh, there's got to be a big crescendo here. So Alexander and we spotted the film. We would have Zoom like hour-long sessions, and we would watch the film together and really talk about and spot, this is where the score would come in and this was where it would go out. And we typically stuck to that. And then he would play me stuff, and, we would, work with it a little bit. There were a few places that we just kept working and even going back to, like when she's reading the script. But yeah, he brought it. He's really, really talented. And I loved how he brought, I'm trying to remember. I mean, we did reference a few movies that I really liked the score. The Social Network was one. It Follows. Oh my God. What a great movie, and what a great friggin' score.
Disaster Piece, is that I think that's the name of that score is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked specifically about that film. It Follows. Oh, and there was another one, an indie film, which I saw. And one thing I really love, which we did quite a bit in the film, is have the music really build to a crescendo and then bam, silence. Because I think silence is so powerful.
I know. I felt that. So watching the movie, there were certain parts where I was thinking of the score, like, oh, it was giving me, like I was mentioning earlier, like Sing White Female thriller, thriller stuff. Yeah. But then there was parts when the silence was there, and it didn't hit me until after the silence was gone that I realized, like, my ears were just kind of by themselves in the actors, and I was like, damn, those choices were great.
Oh, cool.
So that was the score is fantastic. The other thing I want to talk to you about is, as a filmmaker, the film festival circuits. I mean, you've won some awards for this. Can you talk to us about that? Like, what's that like, submitting your films, getting them accepted, being able to go out and showcase your work?
Yeah, it's harrowing, especially if you care, and I do care, but I will say, and I tell filmmakers, I've been going to festivals since I was producing movies, that it is the reward, because you're certainly not getting paid well on low budget independent film, but it is the reward for all the work that you put into making that movie. So go. I went to 4 continents and like 8 countries, and I also felt an obligation, because we were submitting to some pretty nice festivals, that if they were giving me the honor of selecting my film, that I should be there. I should be there to represent it, and also make sure that it looks okay, that it's framed properly, the volume is right. But we had such an amazing time. I mean, my gosh, we kicked off at Fanasporto in Portugal. Danny and I both went, and we won 3 awards there, which we had left already. We found out about that, which was great fun. Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah, and Fantaspo in Brazil, and oh my gosh, this great one in Slovenia, Grossman, and I'm wearing from Biff in Brussels. I mean, and Fright Fest. Fright Fest in London was probably that in Austin were the biggest feathers probably in our cap, and we won an audience award in Austin, which was great.
That's incredible.
But, it was fun to also play. And there's such a difference between playing straight festivals and then playing the genre festivals. Like, we did Heartland, which I was like, how? God, we're in Heartland. Like, and I remember submitting because I'd heard about it, but they had a little a little bit of a genre, small arm. And
Mhm.
so we got into that, but even like Woodstock and Cleveland and Florida, so fun. And I met so many great people. I keep in touch with a lot of the people I met last year traveling to these festivals.
Oh,
So yeah, I
that's
can't
amazing.
speak highly enough about them. Yeah.
But did you notice a difference between like when you were traveling different continents, like how different areas of the world view or watch the film?
I did. I did. In Mexico, we went to a macabre, probably the most passionate fans ever of all the festivals. They wanted to talk for hours about the film. They all afterwards were all in the in the lobby and so passionate. A place, and then in Brussels, that was our toughest audience. And if ever I felt like our screening didn't go that great, it was there. And I think that festival is so interactive. It's a little bit like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and they're so used to screaming at the, it's very interactive. And our film doesn't necessarily fall into that. But Fright Fest was so exciting in Brazil, and everywhere was a little bit different, even in the States. Like Austin had a very different feel than like Screamfest in LA, although that was a beautiful, boy. We screamed at, it's now called like Pentat, one of those gorgeous old theaters. And, so yeah, I'm not very good at watching my own film, like I can't sit there and really absorb, honestly, the response of the crowd. I just think they hate it. They're bored. So I typically don't watch.
Mm.
And what happened was in Portugal, our first festival, we had to go up and say a speech. It was this big old world type theater. And so I was like, oh God, let's just sit down. And so we sat towards the very front, which I never do. I actually could enjoy the movie because I couldn't see. I couldn't watch people to see. I could only hear. And so I could get caught up in it because I wasn't able to read the room. So I could just watch the movie. So that was, for me, if ever I watched my film, I had to do it away from everyone. So I was watching.
Almost like you got to watch your movie for the first time.
It kind of was. That and the screening at Screamfest, because I sat up in the balcony and it looked and sounded amazing. It'll never look and sound that good again, probably.
No. It's why I can't speak because I wasn't there, but I can tell you watching it here.
Okay.
It was amazing. It held up. It was good. It was thrilling. There was some moments in there because I was expecting that Hitchcockian slow thriller build up, but goddamn, there's a couple scenes where I was like, oh shit, like you play really well with the frames, put like what you put in there, what you don't, making the viewer going from different cameras, making us like sort of search the frame, like what are we looking at, trying to assess ourselves, where are we at in the room. And then boom, you put something in there that we're not expecting. I'm not going to spoil anything that was ruin any potential scares.
Yeah.
But it works. And so, given your history with filmmaking, I got to ask for the horror fans listening to this one who are aspiring movie directors. If you had to give them any piece of advice to go out there and make their movie, what would you tell them?
Well, find a script that you're not going to mind working on for years, because it will be years. And then find great people to collaborate with. And if it's your first film, don't be intimidated to get more experienced people to surround yourself with. You don't just have to work with other first timers, and do your research. Like, don't, be prepared for every day. I always think like the work you do in pre-production sets the parameters of how high you can, or how far you'll hit the ball on shooting, so I was ready, because there are times where you get so exhausted, and I had little notes in my script. So if the actors needed a little something, or I had verbs, I had words ready to give me a cue of, oh, that's what I was thinking when I was sitting at home and I wasn't having 12 people ask me questions, because that's more than anything else, a director is just someone answering questions. Because you've got the production designer, is this prop or that one? The costume, this shirt or that? Should it be tucked in or not? And then the actor, well, I don't really like my hair. It's all this stuff. And you might not be as clear-minded in the heat of all of that to really remember, oh shit, at this moment, especially in a thriller like this, like there are certain moments you have to hit. And if you get caught up in like if that was the moment where the producer won out the battle with me, it would be bad. So you have to really know where your fight is, like where, the gauntlet goes down, that you can't move on until you hit certain marks in certain scenes. So yeah,
I love that. Know where your fight is. That is that is great.
Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Sylvia, for taking the time. Follow her. Where can people purchase this? When does it come out? I believe it's the 2nd.
Friday, yeah, June 2nd. My goodness.
This is great.
It's in a few theaters. I know it's at the Lemley in Santa Monica. It's in Durham, where we played at a festival, the Nevermore Film Festival. It's in Chicago. It's a handful of cities, which we have not been very good about putting the information out, because our focus has truly been on the, getting the word out so people can rent it or buy it on Amazon and Apple TV, iTunes, Google Play, and it really does help. Like, that opening weekend for an independent film like ours could mean the difference between, real success, because it's all about placement, and it's all algorithms and how many people rent or buy it right from the top as to where you land. So everyone listening, if you're looking for a film, don't wait. Even if you rent a movie, you have 30 days to watch it.
Yeah, you got time. Just put it in, make the algorithm sing.
Exactly. Yeah, and then follow us. At Follow Her Film is the film across all platforms, and my company is Dolger Films. So you can find me on Instagram, at Dolger Films, or my name on Twitter. And yeah.
I can't recommend it enough. It is a beautiful, refreshing thriller of, something that, that I was yearning for, that I'd seen years ago. And I'm like, okay, we still make them like that. This is good.
Oh, thank you. And you're great. This was fun.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. This was so wonderful.
Thank you.
May I have your attention, please?
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I don't know what real anymore.
Horror. Something even more terrible than you.